Welcome back to the Venture Outfitter. Today we have intellectual property attorney Bill Hulsey that's with us today. He's going to be sharing with us insight about how do you actually tap into the U.S. market, especially if you have interesting intellectual property. One of the things that I can tell you about Bill is Bill's firm is also the firm that did the trademarks and some patents for Tech Ranch in the past, or the little registered seal behind Tech Ranch was actually done by Bill and one of his associates many years ago. I was reminded of that because it's now been enough years that I guess it's 7 years that we're actually re-upping our trademark and we're having him do it. So, but I was real excited about having him come today, mainly because he has actually already done business between Russia and the United States, and he'll tell us a little bit about his background. He'll tell us a little bit more about how you can actually secure your intellectual property and other insight about that. He likes to be very interactive, so feel free in the chat and with questions to prompt questions. I think we already got a number of questions that came from you guys that we're going to be sharing, but look forward to having everyone here and look forward to a productive time. Thank you, Bill, for joining us today. Let me hand it over to you.
Thank you very much.
Excited to have you here today.
Okay, so what I want to do is start with the screen share. And let's see here. Okay. Now, are we sharing screen?
Yep. Well, we had shared screen.
Okay.
There you are. You're sharing screen.
Okay, awesome. Is that in presentation mode where you are?
It is indeed.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's move ahead. So I am going to discuss a number of things, and I think the overshadowing effect on this is how business is transformed. The things that, okay, so we'll talk about business operations on the global stage, the concept of exporting products. Oh, let's see here. Exporting products and engaging in foreign operations, how that continues to grow and some legal considerations relating to that. How companies are investing heavily outside of their borders. This is a truly global market. And relying on foreign consumers to purchase their products, but all of this in the context of the new normal, COVID-19 era world. In this new normal of COVID-19, there will be more government intervention and therefore greater scrutiny of business. Businesses are likely to be operating to some extent with public money. The markets that we face right now and for the foreseeable future are depressed and challenged, and whether it's Europe and its trillion-euro investment into its market, or the multi-trillion-dollar investments that have been made in the US market, all of this infusion of money comes with a cost, and that is to surrender or to transfer some control of the market from the private sector to the government sector in response to receiving those funds. We are moving into, and will for the foreseeable future, have a contact-free economy that includes telemedicine. I've been to the doctor in the last couple of weeks just to check in with dermatologists, with other doctors, and I've not gone to any hospitals. I've maintained an excellent relationship with these doctors, and Seton Hospital here in Austin has been great with the ability to have fully contact-free medical care. But what's even interesting too now, I think this is a great time for automation, whether it's automation in mining and energy production, but also energy, but also in drones and autonomous agriculture and autonomous shipping and autonomous sensing. All of that is going to only rise in this world. And we're going to have new contracts, new contract considerations. We're going to have new IP considerations and e-commerce considerations. We're going to be doing increasingly more and more e-commerce. You know, they say that 48% or more of the businesses in Austin, Texas are capable of being operated from the employees' homes. I have 3 wonderful daughters, and the older 2 work with computer companies. The younger one has been with the hospitality, with the hotel, Sheraton, here in Austin. The older 2 have been cranking away and doing amazing things for their companies. The younger one is trying to figure out what she's going to do. And so this is a time where getting into and being more and more part of an e-commerce world is important. Companies that are starting, whether they're in Russia or Mexico or the US, are going to have to reconsider how they can be and establish more resilience. I've had the pleasure of traveling around the world. I tell people, as a former submarine officer, I've been 1,000 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. I've also been to the top of Mount Sinai. I've been on every continent except for Antarctica and traveled 55 countries around the world. I've enjoyed a lot of time and a lot of work with the University of Texas and with international companies. Visited Russia 5 times over the years and had fun both to travel and for teaching. It's been a lot of fun. But all of that is I think predicated upon the idea that we are going to be requiring more and more in the way of being able to communicate in ways that we haven't communicated before. Some say we'll need to rethink, not just tweak, our business models. People talk about pivoting. What we're having to do and what we will have to do more and more, think of the airline industry. I don't know how that industry is going to tweak or pivot. They've got to totally rethink what they're doing. Learn new ways to connect. We're doing that already. Reconstructing our global business future. I think this is a time where, in many respects, whether you're in Russia or Mexico or China, distance doesn't matter much more than it did before. The ability to communicate a significant portion of the resources that I use. We represent about 200 companies through my IP patent firm, and a quarter of the people that work for us are in Punjab, India. This is a totally different structure. I'm enjoying it a great deal these days. And a lot of this is the concept of looking backward rather than forward. And I think Churchill had it right when he said, the farther backward you look, the farther forward you're likely to see. There's a thinker that will touch on IP and how that relates in this COVID-19 world. The economic statistics, as you know, are challenging. We're changing sectors. There's a fellow named Ray Dalio that people listen to. Ray has said, and I'll tell you more about him in a second here. Ray has said that the coronavirus marks the start of a new future, and I really think he does. That's true. Ray is the chairman and founder of the largest hedge fund in America and perhaps the world, called Bridgewater. And he says recently in March and April that the financial fallout should be viewed in a wider historical context. He has an amazing book called Principles, where he talks about the business cycles that people have gone through, that the world has gone through. And he maintains that this COVID-19 in his words, it's just another one of those. Whether it's a Spanish flu or World War I, World War II, he looks at COVID-19 as just another one of those. And how did people respond? How did the people in London respond to the Blitzkrieg, to the German bombing of London? Well, there are lessons to be learned from that. There's a whole literature that I think, if you look at it one way, it's very interesting to think about, and it's the literature of C.S. Lewis, the theologian, of Tolkien, the writer, the group at Cambridge called the Inklings, and the writing that they generated in the darkest days of World War II. Some of the concepts, the Lord of the Rings, a lot of those concepts were created during World War II, and people in England and London trying to survive from the German bombing. And I think that just the general context. Brene Brown, who's an author today, talks about how we experience today, we're experiencing grief and anxiety. Brene is the world author on guilt and shame. She has the most watched YouTube and a number of 5 New York Times best-selling books on how people interact with one another. And the thing that she says about where we are is that people are experiencing grief and anxiety. Grief as to the loss of the way things were prior to COVID-19, and anxiety as to what the new future holds. I think all of this is to the idea of how we change and how we think. So in the concept of restructuring, Ray says, could take as many as 3 to 5 years. And I do believe that if you look at what happened in the Great Depression in the 1930s, so many amazing companies were found during that time that led us through the amazing years of the 20th century, from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, on to the millennium here, and today the companies that we've come to know and grow with. And a lot of that came through those challenging times. Now, in this world, there's some contract considerations. I think the concept of a contract is something that the legal community is going to have to reconsider, because if you look at the terms and conditions of any contract, those are going to be different. How are they going to be different? Well, the scenarios for contracting, the business relationships are going to be different, what people can do. These are considerations for international contracts that we in the legal community for quite some time have thought to be pretty stable, pretty predictable as to how things should be done. I think in a contact-free or contact-minimized world, we're going to have to rethink some of these issues. You know, what is the governing law? Is the governing law Russia? Is it the United States? Is it Mexico? Is it another country? What is the operative language? Is it always going to be English? Maybe it's going to be Chinese. Maybe it's going to be Russian. Maybe it'll be other languages. And how does that affect or operate within these contracts? Foreign travel. I don't think we have an answer yet as to what is possible and what we can do and can't do regarding foreign travel. And those are oftentimes aspects of contracts for services, contract for purchase, contracts for maintenance, health and safety. Health and safety considerations going forward today are going to be totally different, or today totally different from what they were 6 months ago. How you rewrite every sentence in a standard contract for international goods to pass or services to pass from one venue to another are going to have to be re-examined and are being re-examined in light of the future that's ahead of us. Other issues include export control. What does the CDC, what does the US government Department of Health have to say about particular exports or imports? How are things going to be paid? You can't hold and touch cash as freely as you could have 6 months ago. Not that we spent much time doing that, but the whole idea of what are the forms of payment that are relevant? Is it, can you barter like you used to? Maybe not. Maybe not. Human subject protection and animal care and use as it relates to pharmaceuticals, as it relates to other issues in international contracts. They're going to have to be and are being reexamined. And property, what is property? How is it being protected? How is it being filed for? How is it being housed and positioned? Other issues include facilities. What type of protections, what type of prohibitions are these facilities going to have to experience in these contracts? And then taxation. With governments fundamentally supporting our survival over the foreseeable future, how is that going to affect taxation? Are taxation rates ultimately going to skyrocket because the government needs to be able to be compensated for the payments that have and will and are being made? What are the warranties? Warranties and representations with regard to communication of disease or communication of warranties relating to protective gear. All of these things are going to have to be and are being reconsidered. And then subcontracts, what are the obligations of the parties to subcontracts and the health and safety considerations with regard to these contracts? Some of the other standard terms of periods of performance, what's reliable and what's not. Before this, I haven't seen yet the results, the financial results of the stress that COVID-19 has imposed on us, but that's going to determine or limit some of the performance criteria. Termination, how do we deal with for cause terminations? Acts of God. Is COVID an act of God? Probably. At least that's the way people are thinking. What they call in contracts force majeure, which is an act of God, which allows contracting parties to walk away in the event that something like an earthquake or a hurricane steps in. Well, I would say I've written a lot of contracts, and the concept of a pandemic was not in many of those contracts, and now it has to be. Absolutely has to be. Confidentiality, not only with regard to the transaction, but also with regard to health information and other information that had previously been considered to be private. What are the obligations of the contracting parties to disclose what they are doing and not doing with regard to health information? Publication of personal data, publication of intellectual property. These are things that I think every sentence in those sections have to be reconsidered. And then there's standard terms in contracts that are worthy of consideration. What are the reporting requirements? What do you report? If I've got two teams that are working on a large software development project, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 year ago, to think about reporting the health or any type of disease or infectious condition with regard to the people involved was not a consideration in the reporting requirements of performance under contracts. Might it be going forward? It's certainly worth asking the question. And then intellectual property is always going to be part of it, particularly as we get into the results or the concepts of doing more and more work and less and less contact enabled environment. So thinking about those considerations and the considerations of what intellectual property relates to things that are infectious disease or disease related that previously had nothing to do with intellectual property. In fact, I'm just starting, I've started some work lately with some of the Indian tribes in Oklahoma here, where there's a lot of gambling that goes on. The Indian tribes in the United States are treated as separate nations. And in those nations, there's the ability to do gambling in a way that you can't do in the other parts of the United States. One of the things that the gambling casinos are considering an important aspect of them being able to compete are the ways that they protect the casino guests from infectious disease. So there's a whole family of devices, improvements, monitors, and such that are being added to the casino environment so these companies can stay operating. And so that's an interesting aspect of the intellectual property world. Insurance, I think that's clearly a lot of these insurance contracts are having to be reconsidered and rewritten. And then indemnification. You know, what is the obligation on one party versus the other in the event that there's not only something that is suable, but also indemnifying the other parties as to who has or hasn't a particular disease. And dispute resolution, the ability to go to court. That was one of the first things that shut down here in Austin when we started responding to COVID-19 was the court shut down. The ability, there was a lot of press recently about the United States Supreme Court doing their hearings in the Supreme Court Justice's kitchen. How all these considerations relate to dispute resolution in a contract, arbitration, trials, lawsuits, mediation. How does that all relate to the enforceability or in the ability to hear a dispute relating to a contract? So there are other provisions. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop here for a minute or two and ask if there are any questions relating to contracts and relating to the kinds of, and we'll go on here right now. It's 11:25. Go on here for a few minutes. Are there any questions at this point?
I've got a quick question. Have you seen a decline in people bringing out new ideas and new inventions?
I love that question. I could not have. Thank you very much. What's happened here with with so many people having lost their jobs as a result of this, what I've seen so far, now the economy continues to dwindle away, that may change, but what I have seen since the 1st of March is people have said, you know what, I don't have my job right now. I don't know when I'm going to get it back. I need to do what I can do to keep food on the table. And you know, I had this idea a year ago or 2 years ago, or I had it last week, and I said, since I'm not working at my job right now, I'm going to see if I can create this product and take it to market. You know, if I do that, I need a trademark and I need a patent in order to protect the idea. And so I get anywhere from 2 to 10 calls every day for people trying to figure out how they can begin this process. So I'm seeing, at least at the beginning of this, a lot of activity in terms of the essential intellectual property protections. And I think that's important. But just like anything, if the economy doesn't rebound, if we go to a long U-shape economy and not more of a V, that's going to dwindle away. And I keep my eyes on that all the time. So that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I see. There's a Threadgill's on the north end of Lamar, north end of Burnett and 183, and that's Threadgill's is where Janis Joplin once played as well, and that has recently closed down. It kind of reminded me that her lyric, "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose."
Oh yeah, yeah. Me and Bobby McGee, right? I learned just recently that was written by Chris Christopherson. The song. What a great song, part of Americana. Any other questions?
Yeah, Bill. So one of the I deal with, I don't know if you can hear me. So I deal a lot with medical device companies, and we've been doing a lot of risk mitigation type evaluations for companies' supply chains. And I think there's a lot of people who believe that COVID is all their losses are going to be associated with a business continuity coverage on a policy. And and that's not really, I think it's most people don't understand that those business continuity policies, as you said, do not cover pandemics. So I think are you seeing any or hearing any type of litigations or activities associated with that?
No, I don't. That's not the area in which I practice, but I'm not surprised that if someone were to try to, I mean, in insurance defense, one of the ultimate job of an insurance defense lawyer, and I've got a number of friends who are, how can they use that contract to get out of what an insured would consider an obligation? And if a continuity clause can be struck by virtue of an external event that would be deemed as an act of God, a force majeure, there's not a contract that's properly written that doesn't have a force majeure clause. And I think it would probably be the case that a judge would determine that to be that clause to cover what we're experiencing. And if that's the case, then the likelihood of, like, this is from an IP attorney, I'm not an insurance attorney, the likelihood of that clause, continuity clause, being of considerable help is certainly a question. Okay, I'm going to march on then.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jetty. I'm calling from Texas as well. So, longtime listener of the Venture Outfitters program, first time caller to your show. So I had a question regarding telemedicine and your points about insurance got me thinking. This is sort of speculation, but I did want to get your opinion on what do you think the major shifts are going to be in terms of how insurance companies in the healthcare space are going to be looking at their cost structure, and how might those considerations apply to startups, to tech startups trying to create value in this space. I ask this because we operate in the healthcare space, and what we're trying to do is offer health providers addiction rehabs, basically a solution that will help cost containment and deliver quality care. So yeah, again, the question is, what do you think the major shifts are for insurance providers in this space, and how might that translate to tech startups trying to do some good here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question because I mean, what I've seen in my own personal medical care is I've had this question. So a dermatologist had some of those sunspots on my hand where they use the liquid nitrogen here very successfully to remove a problem. And I don't know how the places like Seton or other hospitals are accounting for the video calls that patients make. I know they're pushing everybody to stay away from the hospital, and if you can do video medicine, then do it, telemedicine, and do it. But I just don't know how much, so the dermatologist that I work with, I just love him to death. We got him, Matt Fox. He's been extremely responsive. He's with Seton, the Dell Hospital, and very responsive. I'm not asking this question, but it seems to me that I know that when I go to the hospital, to the doctor's office, they are careful and complete as it relates to the checking in and copays and all of these things. I've seen, and there may be something that I'm just totally missing, but I've seen doctors, and I've got a number of doctors that work in the neighborhood that live in the neighborhood where I do, and they seem to be much freer with their email and video communication than if they were in their practices physically, where they have all these processes for capturing everything that's being done. And I just don't know how that's all working. So it would seem to me like a value-based or a time-based model for capturing what goes on in telemedicine would be potentially to everyone's benefit, maybe even the patient's benefit. But that's capturing that is something that I think makes a lot of sense. And the startup companies that can do that effectively and painlessly as it relates to the user and perhaps the insuring company, those are some operations. And this happens in the legal industry too. So there's a company called Clio that we work with the small law firm that I have. And they are every couple of months, they come up with a new way that a small law firm can painlessly capture, document, and leverage information technology for making sure that there's not a minute that, or there's not a document that the law firm creates and use that isn't in some way captured so that it goes to the bill. You don't have to bill it, but the ability to bill it is something that's, I think, has a lot of opportunity. And that's where I think small companies can really add to the process. And the other is facilitating with leverage. If you've got 5 callers with a similar problem, and if you can anonymize the responses and through some type of artificial intelligence application, synthesize what's being, we see from time to time, since the 1st of March, these new symptoms that arise. If you can incorporate in telemedicine the diagnosis of, well, I've seen these 3 children or these 5 children with this type of situation, and through some AI application, extract that, anonymizes, make sure that it complies with HIPAA regulations, but then turn that in rapidly into some intelligence about symptoms and how procedures, protocols are becoming effective. That would be another place where I think there are all kinds of opportunities that a small IT company can come in and make a wedge for the things that they can do perhaps more nimbly than a large company can, and create some new opportunities. I think there are tons of opportunities ahead of us, and it's going to be the creative entrepreneurs who can capture those and really turn them into a product, into a revenue stream, into a business that helps everybody concerned.
That's why I actually think that we have such a unique opportunity right now. And I just want to make sure I say that, especially with so many countries represented, not just US and Russia, but Italy and Nigeria. And, part of the value of this interaction and this information is that we can work across these different country boundaries. And it's something that's already been discovered someplace else can be brought to, like as an example, the healthcare problems in the United States probably aren't going to get solved in the United States. They're going to get solved someplace else, and then we'll import the technology here. That's part of what we're here, just to give everyone context about what's the big deal about doing this virtually. What's the big deal about doing it virtually across all these country boundaries?
Well, the quote that I heard recently is that COVID has collapsed about 15 to 20 years of migration of business and people into a digital platform into about 3 months. And that, I think, is absolutely true. Why don't we move on to the next section? What I want to touch on here are some of and this is certainly relates to the questions, and this is the question of exporting products and engaging in foreign operations, which result in a digital world. What I have done here is extract from of all places, the government of Canada. They've provided a nice checklist for doing e-commerce into the United States, and I'm just taking the points and I want to convey them. So the question that has 3 or 4 areas. One is deciding to enter a market. The thing that they suggest is to identify your target audience and understand the audience demographics. And it's just not the US, but it's in all countries. You know, if you're selling something, be clear that you understand what the target audience is. Research whether your specific industry is growing via online channels. Music, I've got a client who's doing some really interesting work with translation. He's using music and how you can learn lyrics from foreign music as a vehicle for training a purchaser or user, teaching a foreign language. And how does that relate to different online channels? And so figuring out, you know, what are the opportunities there? Then he goes on to say, the document says that make sure that the value proposition of your product or brand will be competitive in the US e-commerce market. Will it be competitive in China or in Europe? Those are things to consider. The entry question also relates to what is the sales platform or channel that you want to use? You know, the products that you want to have on eBay or have on Amazon. If the China market is Baidu or is Yandex in Russia, the platform that you want to use. What are the differences amongst those different platforms and how do you use them? What are the tax implications? And this is a place where, as you really look to have a condition have an opportunity in the US and other markets, what are the tax considerations? If I'm selling to Germany, what are the tax consequences of selling into Europe, into the European Union, and into the nation of Germany? And the next we talk about the positioning for sales. And that is just, what do you do? Positioning is a marketing term, and how do you position your company? How do you position yourself, place yourself in a way that you can actually get the customers that you want? So, of course, create a website, pick a payment processor, whether it's PayPal or whether it's Venmo or whatever the payment processor is. Organize the inventory and create a plan of picking, packing, and shipping products. There are lots of ways to get that done. And consider contracting with third-party logistics if your sales volume is high. If you want to sell into China, if you want to sell into the United States, and you're from Russia, it really helps to have a local person who can help you with those logistics. And decide whether to warehouse in the home country or the United States. You know, where do you warehouse? I love driving around, and I haven't done it in a while, but if you drive around the Southeast United States, actually the South Central, Arkansas and Texas, driving past these gigantic Walmart warehouses is, I think it's a testament to Walmart and the free market system that it provides. But you know, how do you warehouse what you want to get into the marketplace? Develop processes for handling customer returns. That's something that I think over the last several years, eBay has really improved the ways that they handle customer returns, and I really applaud their efforts in doing that. I've learned a lot about that and buying products on eBay lately that didn't work out, and how easy it's been to return them. And trademarks. We do trademark filings every single day, and understanding what you can and can't do with regard to trademarks is important. About every other day, we get a query from Amazon or eBay about a new product from a company, and that confirming that they have complied with the Amazon and eBay trademark policies. And further, create customer service systems, including minimum email, phone, and self-help sections. Who do you contract to get that going? If you're selling it successfully on the internet or into the US or foreign markets, how do you offload the requirements for support in terms of phone, email? I'm in an expansion mode right now with a law firm, and I'm going through some of those challenges right now. How do I offload some of the law firm responsibilities for email and phones? I'm working those issues myself right now. And then a marketing strategy. How do you use, is social media the right platform? Is it email? Are there other things? Are there other channels? Those are important for all of us to consider. And then the next section that needs to be looked at in terms of a checklist, make sure your product is easy to find using different platforms, phone, iPad, desktop, whatever it is, all the different platforms that are necessary. Evaluate the pricings to ensure it's competitive and understanding that there are different pricing models. Ensure that product delivery, research, and purchase experience are convenient for customers. I think that's one of the most important things that Amazon provides and others do, and the ability to, you know, I just purchased some products through one of the beauty supply places for the family here, and the transaction did not go well, and it put me right back into Amazon, because that's a place where transactions do go well. And people trying to compete with Amazon, if they don't have a good platform for the purchase experience, it's just going to operate to their financial detriment. I know Kevin has experience in the computer industry with putting people on digital platforms, and I think he probably considers that to be one of the most important things that a company can do, is make sure they do have a good online internet presence. Identify relevant online communities or relationships and leverage into these communities is critical. Pay-per-click advertising, is that what you want? I have found myself that pay-per-click is not the right way for an attorney. A lot of attorneys do it to advertise on the internet. It just doesn't work as I would like for it to do, because I think so many people with an attorney on the internet are window shopping, and it turns out to be, it can be very expensive. There are ways to modulate it down so you do have the advertising that you like, but really, you know, watching that pay-per-click is important. Watching your content. We're getting so much more intelligent these days on how to use SEO platforms for achieving the audience that we want, and content is such an important part of that. And then monitor your online reputation constantly. I think that's absolutely critical. It always changes, and your ability to do new things is I think predicated upon how your online presence allows you to be thought of as more than perhaps who you are today and what you want to be doing in the future. Moving on, social media, email outreach, always a consideration, and data and analytics. My oldest daughter has worked as a data scientist for a company here in Austin, and understanding how all that works. Now, this is important for getting into the U.S. market, and I think it's something that makes sense to give some real time to, and that is the amazing number of associations, whether it's the Small Business Administration, the U.S. Department of Commerce. This is just a small list, but if you're a foreign company and want to have a presence in the U.S. market, these are open organizations by far, and your ability to tap into the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or the Austin Chamber of Commerce or the Small Business Administration. Yes, these organizations are principally for U.S. companies, but if you're a foreign company and think that the U.S. market is something that that could benefit the market and benefit your company, having an open attitude, having an open dialogue with these organizations, including universities, chambers of commerce, is something that I think can be. I've done a lot of international transaction, a lot of international marketing, and working with these chambers of commerce has been, or the U.S. Commercial Service. It is not only for U.S. companies. Some of the best dialogues I've ever had have been through the U.S. Commercial Service, doing international work and located and talking to companies in Germany, in Austria, in the Czech Republic, in Russia, in Mexico, have all been facilitated by the U.S. Commercial Service. And that conduit of commerce goes both directions. let's take a minute. As always, we're getting a little bit behind, but are there any questions at this point?
My main question would be, what are the, are there legal concerns that you have with engaging with any of those organizations, or is there a way of, from the lawyer's view about how I, certainly use these chambers and other groups, but how I might need to legally protect myself there? Is there like nuances there that we have to be careful about?
I have found, I've done work with, like here in the United States, over the years, I've done a good bit of work in Germany. I've done a good bit of work in Mexico, representing clients for U.S. filings. And what I've learned is that if I want to do business in Germany, the two places that I go to are to the U.S. Commercial Service, but here in Texas, in Houston, is I forget what it's called, but it's the German American Chamber of Commerce. And the relationships that I've built over the years and used and developed over the years with the German American Chamber of Commerce have facilitated a lot of contacts with these companies in Germany. And I think going forward, it's going to be really important, since we have questions about how much international travel are we going to be able to do going forward. And the people that have the direct digital contact with the people in Mexico, or the companies in Mexico and companies in Germany, are the people that are with the local chambers of commerce from the represented companies. And I just think there seems to be, in the recent years, a good bit of or some reduction on that. I don't know whether that's a function of the presidential administration or otherwise, but I think that there's been a little bit of tightening on that. But if you've got an interest in doing work in Europe, I think that touching base with and understanding who are at these organizations and how they can facilitate your selling products to Belgium or Spain, countries in Europe, is something that's really something that's important. And then the legal considerations with each one of those. Generally, they're not lawyers on staff who deal with those types of issues, but my experience is that they are just a phone call away from being able to get an answer, whether it's with an embassy. I spend a lot of time working with foreign embassies on legal issues and making sure that we have contractual relationships. They know how to get these questions addressed in their local jurisdiction. So I'm kind of running out of time here.
Let me do a real question. We had one other question I'd like to just go ahead and ask. It was like from one of our Russian entrepreneurs. It says, question again about telemedicine. Two parts. Do doctors have to be from America, or can I be in Russia, for example? And then the second part of the question is, how will the responsibility be formed if the product is purchased in the country of manufacture, or if in a company officially registered in the United States?
Okay, so the question is, two questions, each of which would take about 10 or 15 minutes to fully explain. As far as the medical licensing is concerned, I don't know that answer. I don't know what the licensing requirements are. I think a lot of that can be addressed by virtue of waivers, by virtue of education, by virtue of whatever the platform is, both the doctor being protected by the platform and the potential patient or the actual patient providing necessary waivers for any type of medical treatment that's allowed, and further the overarching responsibility that the medical associations have and the departments of health have. I think in large part, if that type of service can be provided, making sure that there are no health department or medical association mainly health department restrictions, CDC type of concerns. So those are state, by and large, those are state regulated questions, and the ability to perform telemedicine from another country or to another country is a concern of the medical industry. It's not something that I'm not sure how to answer that. I'd be happy to follow up and see if I can help you, get you directed to a source here in the United States about how those questions are addressed. And then what was the second question, Kevin?
Second question was, how is, he says, how will the responsible be formed if the product is purchased in the country of manufacturer or in a company officially registered in the United States? Like, is it possible, is it possible to actually, I mean, how is the responsibility formed for that purchase?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So the sale and use and advertising of a product that's protected by intellectual property rights, most of the time, the purchaser is not held responsible for any violation of someone's intellectual property rights. For example, in a patent, if a patent protects a product, the right that a patent conveys to the patent holder is the right to exclude or prevent others from making, using, or selling the invention. And so if something's been purchased and it has been paid for and brought into a country as having been sold into the country doesn't prevent the personal use. Uses in commerce can be restricted, but it's the sale. If the sale occurs outside the United States, then bringing it into the country and offering it again or using it again for commercial purposes can be restricted. But if I buy a widget in Germany and bring it into the United States, as long as I don't try to sell it, I can continue. I can do that. So, and that's the important. The limitations of intellectual property rights stop at the national borders. And so, if you want protection against a product that's being made in China, most of the time you're going to, and you're not reselling it. So if I've got 1,000 radios that I purchase in China and I use them as company product, and I'm not trying to sell it outside sell them in China, it's a personal property, and it's the owner of the sales in China that are a problem. Now, use in the United States, unauthorized use can be an issue, and advancing on that is probably a concern. But the sale of the product in the United States is not something that you're trying to prohibit. So that's a place where I would, that's a place that I would not be concerned with. But
let me propose this, since he's also asking a few follow-on questions. So what we're going to do is, we try to do with all of our speakers, is we're going to talk Bill into being available over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And
Yes,
we'll focus a lot of the follow-on questions about that. Typically, we're able to talk our speakers into being involved in the Facebook group for, a couple of days. And so I want to make sure I direct some of those questions over to that group and just take advantage of that. One of the things I can say really quick, in the case of Mexico and the United States, we have one of our companies that has a health product, but not a medical product. And there's some differences there that allow you to do some stuff that's different. But since I'm not an attorney, I won't get an opinion on the law, but we'll ask Bill to come back and just be in the Facebook groups for some of the follow-on questions. Yeah. Bill, I know you had I'm not wanting to keep us too tight on the time. I do know that we have have a few more things that you wanted to say. And Kristen just pasted a link to the Facebook group for any of you that are not part of that Facebook group. Make sure you just sign up for it right now. And that way you can actually follow up. You do not have to be a part of the US and Russia delegation to be in that group. We've recognized that we're getting a lot of value for having everyone involved in that group to be a part of the conversation, but that'll be the group that will direct questions to Bill in. Thanks, Bill. Go right ahead.
Sure. A couple of things. One of the things I learned, I've been doing this intellectual property work for about 30 years. And one of the things they teach you when you first put your toe in the water there is in an educational environment, it's really something you want to avoid, and that is to ask and respond to hypothetical questions. Because with intellectual property in many legal areas, you can get yourself wrapped around the axle and chase rabbit holes with questions like, well, what if this or what if that? Tell me what happens when this occurs. If you don't have a question in front of you about a particular product, then the answer can be varied and very different based on what the facts are before you. Let me do this quickly. So actually what I have in front of me is I'm going to flip through these presentations and just whet your appetite for what might be a follow-on dialogue here, because otherwise I'm going to be here for about another 20 minutes and I don't think anyone wants to suffer through that. So if we can, but following on, what is important, there's a lot of good information here, and I think it's important to try to work through that. So I'm just going to highlight each one of these. What I'm focusing on here is getting into the intellectual property piece and how it relates to the concept of intellectual capital. So what I have here, and I'll just work through it, this is a balance sheet that involves the intangible assets of a company and how building and using these intellectual property assets end up creating value and permitting the extraction of value in a business context. The area of intellectual capital and intellectual property is a time-related process, and understanding the mechanics of that in terms of what companies do to survive and to grow, to be in the top half of all corporations, how they lead amongst their peers, and how they become global powerhouses, and the different responsibilities in that context all touches and concerns intellectual property. This is a holistic view of the areas of intellectual property and intellectual assets, beginning with know-how generally. What is know-how? What are trade secrets? What are patents? What are copyrights? And what are trademarks? And how do they all relate to one another? With regard to know-how, there's some rules and there's some possibilities for identifying and working through know-how and working with innovation that increase the overall intellectual capital and value of a company. One of the areas is trade secrets. Trade secrets relates to what is not generally known, what gives a company a competitive advantage, and for which there are reasonable efforts to keep that information secret. And there are certain considerations with regard to trade secrets that are important. A subset of both know-how and trade secrets are patents. Patents are creatures of statute, US statutes, but international statutes. And patents relate to or can be awarded for any process, machine, article of manufacture, or composition of matter, or any improvement thereof. Those are utility patents, but they're also design patents. Design patents relate to any ornamental aspect of an article of manufacture. So sometimes with the product, you're not able to secure protection, patent protection for what it does, but if it has a unique design or characteristic, you can protect it by way of a design patent. The big thing with patents is that timing considerations are more critical if you're going to create these assets than other considerations such as trade secrets and copyrights. But they all work together An important aspect with regard to patent rights, particularly with the startup company, is this phrase, file early, file often. When you have a product that you're developing, not thinking about it, oh, I want a patent for this product and that will take me. No, you need to think about, I'm building a portfolio of patent assets, intellectual property assets that will ultimately make me competitive on a national and global scale. Using the provisional patent system is really important. Copyrights. Copyrights relate to any creative work that is fixed in a tangible medium of expression. A book, a song, a writing, a statue. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act in the early 80s said expressly, creative work that is fixed in it's not tangible, but a digital platform in software or on the internet is a tangible medium as far as the law is concerned and therefore protectable. Copyrights are different from patents in that they operate by law as well as under the copyright statute. And then last are trademarks. Trademarks are creatures of statute as well as the law. There are things called common law trademarks and federally registered trademarks. Trademarks, if there's anything that I teach a startup or growing company, the place where you're going to get yourself into lawsuits and into legal problems as an early stage company, it's not going to be patents. It's probably not going to be copyrights, but it probably will be somewhere in the area of trademarks. Trademarks are so cheap to secure, and if you don't do it right, and you continue to operate without getting your federally registered trademarks and rely solely on common law trademarks, it's not unusual to have that mistake. First of all, it gets you when you least can deal with it, and it can be very, very expensive. And for filing a trademark, which typically is in the neighborhood of $1,500, that prevents all of that, it's really, really inexpensive. Okay, so that's that. Questions on trademarks and copyrights. Let's use the Facebook and let's use follow-up from that. That's what I had to say at this point. I'm here for questions and I'm here for follow-up as far as what Tech Branch and what the listeners want to talk about in the future.
Let's do this. I do want to ask, I know that one of the things that there's not a lot of knowledge among entrepreneurs about that you mentioned really quick that I just want to go back to is the provisional patent process. And since it requires so much less money to get it started, could you say something about that just so that we have a little bit of more knowledge about that? Because I find that most people don't have any knowledge. Most of the entrepreneurs I've touched have not been had any information about that.
Yeah, so the scenario that frequently occurs with our clients, we do a lot of startup work for emerging growth companies. And when a potential client calls and they have a brand new widget that they want to protect, they think it's patentable, I say, fine. The first two steps in the patent area that makes sense for you to consider, one is to do a patent search. 10 years ago, I was not such an advocate of patent searches. Today, the software and databases, I can, for a very reasonable fee, access 55 million patent documents using 12 national and international databases, and as a result of that, create a report for a client that typically is between 25 and 40 pages and gives the client a very good idea of whether or not the new widget that he wants to protect is worthy of the investment for patent protection. If so, if it's a brand new widget and it really hasn't been tested in the market, the idea, the new product can best be protected and best be commercialized by filing a patent that gives you the right to say patent pending. And then go from there, do your Shark Tank, do whatever you need to get out into the marketplace and start testing your product in the marketplace. The least expensive way to obtain patent protection is a provisional patent application. Now, it used to be that we could file virtually anything as a provisional patent protection because we could rely upon the patent laws that said in the United States that the first to invent receives the patent. That went away. That went away in 2011, actually 2012. But the thing is, it went away. And now the first to file, not the first to invent, gets the patent. Well, what that does is put a lot of responsibility on the provisional patent document to properly describe how to make and use the invention.
We were having a internet slowdown. Is that my connection or is that everybody?
It's not in that
No, it's everyone.
doc.
Everybody.
Bill, yeah.
Bill, we hadn't heard you since you said about 3 minutes back.
Didn't happen. And that the different provisional,
I think we lost Bill.
You know what we'll do about that?
Wow, okay.
And
I think it's,
Bill, I'm not sure if you can actually hear me. This is one of the joys of the joys of working from home. It looks like that he might have dropped off. What I'm going to do is, so I invited Bill. Someone asked a while ago via the chat. I have invited him into the Facebook group, and Bill's not a big user of Facebook, and we're still looking for the right platform for bringing all of you all together, because sometimes Facebook can not be the right platform. But what we'll do is I'll make it a point that myself or Kristen will be the bridge with Bill. And like I said, most of the speakers that we've had have been willing to, give 24 to 48 hours of fair game interaction. Now, Bill is really interested, based on his work that he's done between Russia and the United States. He's really interested in actually in being involved in the conversation. Out of all of our speakers, he was the one that was most engaged, saying, hey, get them to get our questions in first and all that sort of stuff. So part of what we'll do is we'll make sure that we support that. And, we'll just make sure that we actually follow up with him. Post the questions into there. Kristen will start a thread. I think she probably already did, just based on what the note that she posted a while ago. And if you have follow-on questions, we'll make sure that we tag Bill in on that and get some answers. And then for specific ones of you, we'll actually, certainly look at having Bill and his firm be the intellectual property company that you go to. They do all sorts of different types of law, but the thing that they really specialize on, at least based on my experience and the TechRanch experience, is in trademarks, patents, and copyrights. And in fact, like I mentioned earlier, I'll be updating our trademarks later this month. And so actually in June, I'll be updating that. So that'll be happening for TechRanch as well. What we're going to do is we'll go ahead and take things to a wrap. I want to remind you that in about 6.5 hours, we will have a campfire. This is available for everyone. It's a different type of networking event. I'd been to a lot of networking events in the past, and typically, especially in the Zoom and the other type of networking events, you're standing there with your drink and nothing really happens. What we're going to do is we will make sure that there's a structure to this, whether you're an engineer or a marketing person or a salesperson. You'll have a chance to get things out with each other, with each other. And so make it a point to join us. And if you can't join for today, and if it's also, I know it's inconvenient for some of you time-wise, we'll be doing them at all sorts of different times, because I'm convinced, since we have entrepreneurs from Australia to Siberia, from Korea to Nigeria, and obviously Texas and Oklahoma and Mexico and Chile in between, I want to make sure that we actually do that. So yeah, 6:30 by Texas, per the question that just came in on chat, that will be today. If you need the details, we always publish our details first and foremost at techranch.com/events. And we will have coming up soon another event. Courtney TechRanch's Chief Value Officer. It will be actually doing a talk about how to actually engage with customers, and this should already be up on the website, how to engage with customers with empathy so that you can actually have an active sales dialogue. And for those of you all that are working across country boundaries, I think this is really critical, because how do you actually, the process that works here in the States doesn't necessarily work the same way across the other places. So you have to come up with different ways of interacting on that. Hey, Bill, I just, I don't know if you can hear me. I see you're back. I just signed you up for being on the Facebook for
I'm so sorry.
a couple of days.
Okay.
And yeah, other than that, we're going to just go ahead and take things to a wrap.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you taking care of all the different entrepreneurs that we've introduced you to over the years. And we'll be talking to you about our TechRanch trademarks again. I just mentioned the whole crew here. But with that, Kristen, is there anything else that we need to talk about today?
Nope, I just hope to see everyone at Campfire this evening, and hope you guys, or evening here. I hope we see you guys next Thursday. Kevin will be talking about Lean Canvas next week, and then the following week we have Courtney. So
in fact, that's a really important thing. One of the things I noticed, and as we've gone to more speakers, a lot of times some of the Venture Forth content, we have a program called Venture Forth. We are going to do an online version of that program coming soon. So Venture Outfitter is going to be this thing you can plug into a lot of different things. Then we're going to actually offer other courses like the Venture Forth class, or the course we've run more than 45 times over the years and had literally more than 1,000 entrepreneurs go through. That'll be available. But one of the things I want to do is I want to go ahead and start introducing concepts during the Venture Outfitter time again, because we need how is it that we have not just broadcasts, but opportunities to raise our game together and build ventures at this low cost virtual way so we can actually push things even farther. That's what's going to be happening. I'll be taking us through the Lean Canvas, the way that in the early days when Ash Moria was working on it, I was working side by side with him. We'll talk about the simple Zen version of the Lean Canvas next week. And then Courtney will be presenting the selling with empathy after that, the week after. Let me go back to you, Bill. Thank you again for today. This is great. And thank you for being
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Yeah.
To see all these. This is an amazing time. I can't say it enough, that it is lots of things to be thankful for wherever we may be, but staying together and staying focused and staying energized, I think is really what's important right now.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you all. We'll call it a day for today, and hopefully see y'all later today at the virtual campfire. If not, we'll see you next week. Okay. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.